In our first video for the chapter, we are going to learn about something called a relation. And a relation is just a fancy word for connecting two different variables together. In order to understand what a relation is, I'm going to draw a little bit of a visual right here. I want you to draw something similar to this awesome machine that I'm drawing on my whiteboard. The idea of a machine will help you guys keep straight what's going on with relations, because we see them all year long, this concept right here. When you have a relation, you are connecting two different variables together. So what you usually do is you have your input variable, the one you start with, and you have your output variable, the one you end with. You guys are probably already familiar with this, but we use the letter x usually for our input variable, and we use the letter y for our output variable. And what's going to happen is we start with some number for x, our input, and we get a number out for our output. So let's say, for example, I started with the number 2. I put a 2 into my machine right here. Something's going to happen inside this machine. We don't know what it is. There's something going on, and a number is going to come out. So maybe I'm just making this up. My input is a 2, and my output ends up being 5. We don't know what this rule is right here. Maybe they added 3, and that was the rule. Maybe they decided to double the number and then add 1 after that. So we don't really know. But there's some rule that gets us from 2 for x and a 5 for y. This is a relation. It connects this number somehow with this number. And I'm going to make up a couple more points for this example right here. Let's say I plugged in a -4 to this machine, and I ended up getting out somehow a 2.8. So obviously I'm not just adding 3, and I don't even know what the rule is here. I'm just making something up. And for my last points, I'm going to plug in a 0, and I'm going to get out a -1 and 1/4. Bring a mixed number into this here. So there's some crazy rule that gets us from our x inputs to our y outputs right here, and that's called a relation. There are a couple different ways you can express a relation or show them, because usually you're not going to see machines like this on your math papers here, cool though they are. One option we have for representing a relation is doing it through a table. And when you make a table, you guys are pretty familiar with this already, you're basically going to have a little 2-column chart right here. X's or inputs go on the left, outputs go on the right, and you just pair up the numbers from the display earlier. So I'm going to take this same example and show you a couple different ways you can represent it. If it was -4, that was a 2.8, and 0 went with -1 and 1/4. So you're basically just going to take your inputs right there, and you're going to put them into a little table. That's one option. A second way we can represent relations is with a graph. So when we make a graph, we're talking about our good old coordinate axes right here. Mine are a little bit wobbly. Hopefully yours look nicer. But we have the x-axis, and we have the y-axis. And we're just going to plot these points right here, same ones that are in the table, on a grid. When you do that, the x-axis, my first point was 2, 5. I'm going to make like little tick marks right here. +2 would send us 2 in the positive x direction. And then it's a +5 on the y-axis. That's going to be 2, 5 would be a dot like right there for that first point. My second point over there was a -4. So I go negative in the x direction this way. And 2.8, obviously in my graph right here, I'm not going to be able to get super detailed with this. 2.8 has to be between 2 and 3 on the y-axis here. 2.8 is a little closer to 3 than to 2. So I'm going to put it kind of at this height, but I have to go to the x first. So -4, and 2.8 is going to be somewhere like right there for my second point. And then my last point right here, 0, and I have a mixed number or a fraction for this. It's always a good idea to turn this into a decimal. It just makes it easier to work with. You keep the -1 out front, and then you just do 1 divided by 4 to get your decimal part. That ends up being a 0.25. This is the same thing as that. So I would go 0 on the x. I don't go anywhere, and it's a -1.25. That's -1, and -1.25 is closer to -1 than to -2, so it'd be a dot right there. There are two more ways that you can write relations that we'll use a lot in this class, and I've already kind of started them right here. I have a new slide here just to clean things up so I'm not squeezing everything in on there. Using the same example. You don't have to recopy this. You already have that on your board from earlier. Another option, I already kind of used a graph, so this shouldn't be anything crazy, but you can just make a list of ordered pairs. By ordered pairs, we're talking about our x, comma, y. So our 3 points from this example that we've been using in this video were 2, comma 5. We had -4, comma 2.8. And then we had 0, comma -1 and 1/4. When you have a list of things like this, I have a list of 3 points right here. Use squiggly brackets like this to show that it's a list. So these mean that you have a list of something. And the final thing I have to show you guys in this video is called a mapping diagram. It is just another way of representing a relation along with the other 3 I've already told you. And a mapping diagram, you don't see them all that often, but they come up occasionally, so I like to at least teach it. You're going to draw yourself 2 ovals right here. We have our input, or our x oval, and we have our outputs over here. And the numbers generally go in order, although they don't have to. So I have my inputs -4, 0, and 2 right there. And I have -1 and 1/4. I have 2.8, and I have 5 over here. And you just draw arrows connecting the numbers that go together. So -4 went to 2.8, 0 went to -1 and 1/4, and then 2 went to 5. So in all, there are 4 different ways we're going to use that we can represent a relation.